Yes, Mr. Tiga.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Honors, on the 12th and 13th of July, 1995, about 25,000 Bosnian Muslim civilians were bussed outside the enclave of Srebrenica to the territory under Bosnian government control. As that operation progressed, the Supreme Commander, Radovan Karadžić, was advised that Provaja 95 was going according to plan. As Mladić stated in the intercept of 12 July that we saw moments ago, the VRS was transferring all Muslim women, children, and elderly men, those who wanted to go and those who didn't, just as envisioned and directed by Directives 4 and Directive 7. Here is a 12 July 1995 report from the main staff to Karadžić, describing the situation in the Corps. All the Corps units are at the highest level of combat readiness and are doing everything to ensure that there are no surprises. The units engaged in carrying out the Provaja 95 task are carrying out all the combat tasks according to plan. And it goes on to specify some of the activities, and then it continues regarding the situation in the territory. In the Drina Corps zone of responsibility, the population is being taken from the Srebrenica enclave to Kladin in an organized manner. It is estimated that on this day, there are about 10,000 Muslims to be transported. Meanwhile, Your Honors, the Bosnian Serb Army and Bosnian Serb police forces completed the separation of the men and boys in Podachari, that is the approximately 1,000 to 2,000 men and boys, and transported them to Bratunac, the immediately adjacent municipality just a few kilometers away. This on July 13th. Now, turning to the other group of men and boys I referred to, the larger group, those who had gathered at Sushnari and began to flee toward Muslim-held territory in Tuzla, that same day, on July 13th, thousands of these men were captured or surrendered to Bosnian Serb Army or Bosnian Serb police forces. I want to show you a clip of men from the column surrendering, a video that was filmed by a Serb journalist accompanying a Bosnian police commander. And you will see a man being forced to call to his son and to other Muslims in the column to surrender. And then you will see men from the column surrendering.
I'm down here, Nermin.
Ici, venez ici, c'est sûr. Avec Ramo.
Avec Ramo.
Avec les Serbes. Allez-y, vous dites que vous êtes avec les Serbes.
With the Serbs.
Est-ce que tu peux appeler encore une fois? C'est sûr ici avec les Serbes.
French again? Yes. We can continue.
Nermin. Come down here. I'm down here. It's safe to come to the Serbs. Come on. They all should come. Nermin. Come down here. It's safe. I'm with the Serbs. Come, all of you, as many as there are of you. I don't know, from some desert. How much time did you spend there? We spent 2 days and 2 nights. Completely surrounded. What? Where are your rifles? I didn't have a rifle. I did not. I'm a civilian. A civilian? Sure. I don't fight. Are you very afraid? How can I not be afraid? Come on, man, don't be scared. What are you afraid of, for fuck's sake? Come on, have no fear.
Čuje li se i to na to? Alo, novina!
Ovo kad je ovo istigo. Prednji. Ovu. Otkud majica je?
Kako neću da se...
S kim idu se? Jesi. Krivo, bak. Sve ovo je krivo.
Your Honors, that man being forced to call to his son was a man named Ramo Osmanović. His remains were found in a mass grave. His teenage son, Nerman, to whom Ramo was forced to call with the promise, quote, "It's safe to come to the Serbs," unquote, his remains were found in a mass grave as well. By the afternoon of 13 July, the Bosnian Serb Army and Bosnian Serb police forces had custody of approximately 5,000 to 6,000 Muslim prisoners at three main points along the road that you saw on the map earlier. That was Novo Kosaba, Konjević Polja, and Sandici. Throughout the operation, the Supreme Commander, Radovan Karadžić, was kept abreast of the activities in and around Srebrenica, including the large-scale surrender of Muslim men from the column. On the night of 13 July, the VRS sent an, quote, "urgent," unquote, report to Karadžić, which stated the following, quote, "The enemy from the former enclave of Srebrenica is in a state of total disarray, and the troops are surrendering in large numbers to the VRS," unquote. And as you'll learn, VRS reports to Karadžić over the following days also notified him of the capture of Muslims by the VRS. But let me remain focused on the 13th. On the afternoon of the 13th, approximately 1,000 Muslim prisoners who had surrendered or been captured were bused or marched from Sandici to the nearby Kravica warehouse. And at that warehouse, these prisoners were executed by Bosnian Serb Army and Bosnian Serb police forces. Other organized execution were carried out on that day by police forces at Jadar River and Sandici Meadow. During the late afternoon and early evening hours of 13 July, the remaining prisoners captured along the road were transported to Bratunac, where they were detained in buildings, trucks, buses throughout the town, along with the other Muslim men who had been separated from their families in Potocari. These thousands of prisoners were detained in appalling conditions on the night of the 13th, without food, without medical attention, with insufficient water. Many were killed right in the center of Bratunac. Many more were beaten savagely. And meanwhile, the Supreme Commander continued to be kept abreast of events. I mentioned earlier the regular reports he received, but he was also in direct contact with General Mladić. That evening, on the 13th of July, at about the time that the very last Muslims were being bussed and trucked out of the enclave by the Bosnian Serb Army, Bosnian Serb police, and civilian authorities, Karadžić, from his office in Pale, spoke with Mladić for approximately an hour on a speakerphone. Their conversation was cordial throughout. One witness to the conversation overheard them discussing the promotion of Radoslav Krstić, who was convicted of aiding and abetting genocide. Another witness will testified that Mladić reported to Karadžić that, quote, Srebrenica was done, unquote, and that, quote, Žepa was next. Again, this call took place at approximately the time of the departure of the last buses removing the remaining women and children, the last Muslims in Srebrenica. As Mladić reported to Karadžić, Srebrenica was done. Thus, the evidence is clear that the command chain functioned as it was intended to during this period, with Mladić and other elements of the VRS reporting to the Supreme Commander. And on the 13th, that Supreme Commander, Karadžić, was aware that mass expulsions had been underway, that Srebrenica was, quote, done, that large numbers of Muslim male prisoners had been captured. And he would also speak to his hand-picked new civilian commissioner for the Serb municipality of Srebrenica that evening. That's Miroslav Duronić. Duronić could have made that call from his office, but in a moment of fortuitous historical irony, Duronić left his office and went to the Bratanac Brigade headquarters in an effort to keep the call as secret as possible. What he didn't know was that military transmissions were less secure than the telephone landline he had in his office. And as a result, we know that Karadžić not only knew about the prisoners, but ordered their transfer out of Bratanac, which was in uncomfortable proximity to the internationals. Indeed, close enough so that internationals were able to hear shots, as you'll see in one Dutchbat report. During that conversation, Karadžić asked, how many thousands? Quote, that the president is asking how many thousands? Duronić, about 2 for the time being. And this intercepted conversation, Your Honor, takes place through an intermediary. Duronić is talking to someone who's speaking to Karadžić. Duronić can hear Karadžić on the other end. About 2 for the time being. 2, Mr. President, heard in the background. Duronić, but there'll be more during the night. And Karadžić told him what should be done with these prisoners. Duronić, the president says, all the goods must be placed inside the warehouses before 12 tomorrow. Duronić, right. Duronić, not in the warehouses over there, but somewhere else. That is, Your Honors, somewhere other than Bratanac. Now, although Karadžić tried to mask this conversation using code, warehouses, goods, he cannot hide what it reveals. He knew that Muslim prisoners were being held in Bratanac, and he ordered them moved to warehouses elsewhere. And that is exactly what happened. Starting that night, shortly after the conclusion of this call, and continuing on to the next morning, the prisoners were transferred from Bratanac to temporary detention facilities in Zvornik, or around Zvornik, where they were held prior to their execution. Over the course of the next 72 hours, they were all, but for a miraculous handful of survivors, murdered. Your Honors, you will hear evidence from some of those survivors and what they went through, waiting for hours underneath piles of bodies, feigning death until they were able to make their escape. Now, bear in mind that while this slaughter was taking place, the VRS-run camp in Batković, that's in Bijeljina, was still functioning more than 3 years after Mladić had established it to handle the surplus of civilians who were then being cleansed from their homes. It had the facilities to handle thousands of prisoners. It was just 60 kilometers away from Zvornik by asphalt road. Batković was the place that captured prisoners should have been sent, were they to be held as prisoners or exchanged. But that is not where the Muslim men in Bratanac went. They were sent to the Zvornik area because they were not going to be exchanged. but because they were going to be killed. Your Honors, you will hear that Miroslav Duronic has suggested that Karadžić intended that the Bratunac prisoners be sent to Botković to protect them. But that is belied by the evidence. Not only did Karadžić order the prisoners sent to warehouses rather than to the Botković camp, not only were prisoners in fact sent to schools and other makeshift detention facilities as ordered by Karadžić, but Karadžić then sought to ensure that the mass killings would not be known as they were happening and afterward. But before I address Karadžić's efforts to ensure that the mass killings remain hidden, let me point you to some additional discussions he had that preceded those efforts. You will learn, for example, that the next day, on the 14th of July, Duronic met with Karadžić in the president's office in Pale and spoke with him about the killings in the Kravica warehouse. Later that same day, on the 14th, after meeting with Duronic, Karadžić met with an American visitor, Bob Đurđević. Together, they watched televised CNN and Sky News coverage of the situation in Srebrenica. Karadžić, speaking to Đurđević, took credit for Directive 7 and the attack on Srebrenica. And in Đurđević's contemporaneous notes of the meeting, he wrote, R.K. Karadžić said that the attacks on Srebrenica and Zepa were a part of what he called, quote, my order number 7, unquote. He said that their objective is, quote, to raise the temperature to the boiling point, unquote. And during this meeting, Karadžić also received a phone call from one of his field commanders from Srebrenica regarding military action around Konjević Polje and Kasaba. And this call was yet another of the sources of information that kept the Supreme Commander, the man who had ordered the operation, informed throughout. And is yet one more example, beyond the regular reports, beyond Mladić, beyond beyond Karadžić's civilian commissioner, beyond direct calls from military commanders in the field, Karadžić also received information on the situation on the ground from the police and state security. In this intercept of the 16th of July, 1995, a Bosnian Serb Army main staff duty officer tells Mladić that Karadžić has just called the Bosnian Serb Army main staff because Karadžić had received information from the Bosnian Serb police, and specifically from the head of state security, that the Zvornik Brigade commander had opened a corridor in the VRS lines through which Muslims from the column were passing through to Muslim-held territory. Quote, the president called a short while ago. He said he had been informed by Karadžić, that's the head of state security, that Pandurović had arranged passage for the Muslims over to that territory. And I'll discuss a bit later how this information about the escape of Muslims angered Karadžić. So, what did the Supreme Commander do with the knowledge that Muslim men were being seized, detained, and murdered? He attempted to ensure the operation's continuing success through false assurances to an increasingly suspicious international media and to an increasingly alarmed international community. From the very start of the Srebrenica operation until well after the world knew about the mass killings, Karadžić covered up what was happening or had taken place. He insisted that the Muslim population had, quote, left voluntarily, unquote, and he lied to the media regarding the captured and executed Muslim men and boys. By the night of the 13th of July, 1995, as I've described, Karadžić had full knowledge of the forcible transfer of the population. He knew of the thousands of Muslim men detained in Bratunac and had ordered that they be transferred to warehouses. And later that same night, at around 21:30 hours, Karadžić gave an interview to a journalist for the Spanish newspaper El País. When asked about Srebrenica, Karadžić stated, Srebrenica is now free. Unfortunately, very few Muslims may stay in Srebrenica because now they are aware that Srebrenica is going to belong to the Serbian state. And since it is clear Muslims want to live in a Muslim state, and they express their own willingness to go to the Muslim state, to the part of Bosnia that is under Muslim control and is going to be Muslim state or Muslim Croat Federation, unquote. He went on to deny allegations of ethnic cleansing, stating, quote, anyone who wanted to stay could stay, unquote. Stated that in full confidence, of course, that the media did not have access to, for example, Directive 4, ordering the cleansing of the enclaves, or Directive 7, ordering, quote, an unbearable situation of total insecurity with no hope of further survival or life for the inhabitants. 4 days later, Karadžić was interviewed again, this time by British journalist David Frost. This interview took place as the victims of the killing operations in Zvornik were being buried in mass graves. When asked whether he felt he may have made a mistake in taking Srebrenica, given the immense scale of international condemnation, Karadžić replied, quote, not at all, unquote, and justified his view with the comment that Srebrenica had not been a safe area, but a stronghold. When asked by Frost to explain the allegations that 15,000 men from Srebrenica were missing or unaccounted for, Karadžić denied that there were missing men, other than those in the column who were still en route to Tuzla. And here's a portion of that interview.
The question of the numbers of people who were found or whatever. What about the figures we've read in the media, your favourite area, in the media about 15,000 men missing, unaccounted for, from Srebrenica, and that you have got them somewhere? That's what we read. That's
Even yesterday and today we have opened our lines, and many of them have entered Muslim territory. Many of them have been combatants, and our local commander has allowed them to pass through our territory, and they are passing even tonight. Many of them are in the forests, and they are trying to get Muslim-controlled territory, and we are not interfering. We don't want to fight with them because they do not intend to take our territory. They want to leave our territory.
And there are not 15,000 men from Srebrenica missing?
No, absolutely not. Many of them have joined their own people yesterday and the day and today, and even tomorrow there will be many more of them passing through Serbian lines.
And here's what actually happened, Your Honor, and was happening. I won't attempt to describe in detail the horror of the meticulous execution of over 7,000 men and boys, which took place over those days. I'll merely give a very brief listing of the largest organized killings. On the 13th of July, Kravica warehouse, approximately 1,000 executed with automatic rifles and hand grenades. Over the next days, 14 July through 16 July. A Rahavat school and in the nearby fields, approximately 1,000 executed. The Petkovici school in the dam on the afternoon and evening of 14 July and during the early morning hours of 15 July 1995, approximately 1,000 executed. Ročević school in Kozluk, over 1,000 executed, several at Ročević and over 1,000 at Kozluk. I want to show you some photos of those victims after they were exhumed from that area. The first you'll see is of the mass grave, or a mass grave. Second, next, please. See the blindfold. Next, please. Man with his hands tied behind his back. Next. Your Honors, you'll hear evidence, and we could return to that slide, please. You'll hear evidence that the Muslim victims in Kozluk clutched at weeds and shrubbery as they were executed along the banks of the Drina River. And you can see that depicted in this photo. And continuing the terrible litany of executions, Kula School near Pilica, Branjevo Farm, several executed at the school, the remaining approximately 1,200 executed at Branjevo Farm. And this is a photograph depicting some of the bodies at Branjevo Farm. Pilica Cultural Center, approximately 500 executed. Your Honors, these large-scale killings required enormous resources. Trucks, ammunition, heavy machinery for burials, thousands of liters of fuel, as well as significant manpower to secure the detention and execution sites and to carry out the actual executions and burials. They were carried out quickly and efficiently and required a high degree of planning and coordination between the Bosnian Serb Army, the Bosnian Serb police, and the civilian authorities, all of whom were involved. The list of those who knew and who had to know is long, from Mladic and Tolomir and others on the main staff, the officers and soldiers of the Drina Corps, officers and soldiers of the Zvornik, Bratanac, and other brigades of the Drina Corps, the Ministry of the Interior, the subordinates of the Minister of Interior, and above all, the Supreme Commander. In addition to these large-scale killings, Your Honors, around this time period, there were organized killings of a lesser scale, but nevertheless significant. At Jadar River, Churska Valley, Sandici, the Luke School near Tisza, Snagovo, Turnovo, and Bistina. And sporadic killings of Muslim men continued past July. As the VRS's own reports show, after the 17th of July, Muslim stragglers were hunted down and executed on the spot around Srebrenica and Žepa. Throughout this time, from directly after the fall of Srebrenica onwards, mainstream media reports were circulating about the massive ethnic cleansing of Srebrenica and the indications that mass murder had been committed by Bosnian Serb forces. On the 17th of July, 1995, the same day as Frost's interview with Karadžić, a British newspaper reported on the piles of corpses in front of the Kravica warehouse. Headline of that article was "Bodies Pile Up in Horror of Srebrenica." And that same day, 17 July, Studio B television in Belgrade aired the actual video, a video of the pile of bodies outside the Kravica warehouse. I'm going to show you that video. You'll see it first quite quickly, and then it'll be replayed for you in slow motion.
Hello, how are you? What's up? There are dead Muslim soldiers and can you see that, for fuck's sake? No one is here on the line.
Yet Karadžić continued to issue denials of any crimes by Bosnian Serb forces in Srebrenica. When asked months later by a CNN reporter about the allegations of massive crimes in Srebrenica and the need for an investigation, Karadžić insisted that he had already initiated an investigation of his own. He claimed that UNPROFOR had monitored the whole operation and that there was, quote, no mass killing or any killing, unquote. By this time, thousands of bodies of victims had been dug up and transferred to secondary graves by the VRS, the MUP, and civilian authorities in an attempt to cover up the crime. I'd like to show you this clip.
You say that you're for an investigation or any kind of trial concerning alleged atrocities. What about the unanswered questions concerning Srebrenica? Will there be conducted some kind of investigation? Would you pledge such an investigation?
I have already ordered the investigation about any allegation, and among them about Srebrenica. I was reported that the UNPROFOR people has monitored the whole affair. There was no killing, mass killing or any killing. That Muslims have checked many more refugees in Srebrenica in order to get more help for their own army.
Earlier, Your Honor, I directed your attention to Karadžić's words to the Bosnian Serb Assembly on the 6th of August, 1995, during which he praised and took credit for the Srebrenica operation. I'll direct your attention to those again, this time on a slide. Quote, the time had come, and I signed Directive Number 7 to capture Tiočak, Srebrenica, Žepa, and Goražde. The directive was signed, and we embarked on it. I was in favor of all the decisions that we made, and I support them. All the decisions are recorded in the Supreme Command. I ordered in verbal and written form to attack Žepa and Srebrenica. And he added that they had not been able to take Goražde at that time, but, quote, there will be the right time to take Goražde, just as there was the right time to conquer Srebrenica. There will be the right time to attack and destroy Goražde, unquote. On other occasions, he singled out commanders of the operation for praise, particularly Karadžić. This was an interview on August 4th, 1995. Now, Karadžić, for instance, who planned it in front of me, and I approved that task for Srebrenica, who did it exceptionally well. Of course, the main staff, Mladić, and all others helped, but it should be known that Karadžić is a great Army commander, unquote. Your Honors, the only concern that Karadžić ever expressed about Srebrenica was that one of his commanders had let some of the Muslims escape. He was angry that some of the Muslims had gotten away. This is how Karadžić described the escape, as he called it, escape of, as he called them, the Turks. Their escape to Muslim-held territory. And this is what he said at the Bosnian Serb Assembly. Quote, 9,000 armed Turks in the woods and mountains could have taken Srebrenica again. They could have burned Milici, Vlasenica, and Zvornik. People from that area can tell you all about it, because it could have happened if they were smart enough and if they had a command. It is a landing division with 9,000 men. It could have been a landing operation. Only our men and dear God could save us. About 50 to 60 of our men got killed there trying to block them, but several thousand of soldiers eventually managed to pass, and now Srebrenica Division has been formed, lined up in Tuzla, and ordered to get back to Srebrenica. We were not able to surround and destroy that enemy because we were in a hurry to get to Žepa, and we assigned 2 generals to Žepa to waste 15 days in negotiations with jackasses and idiots who were wasting their time, instead of letting Rajko Kusic finish all of it, or maybe General Krstić, who proved to be very good, unquote. And who were Krstić and Kusic, who should have, quote, finished all of it? Karadžić was the lieutenant colonel who led the cleansing of Novosjoci in Sokolac in 1992. That was when he was a lieutenant colonel, back when eastern Bosnia was being cleansed. That was an operation in which the men were separated from the women and children expelled, and the men executed. Here's Karadžić's terse report of that operation. During the day, the village of Novosjoci was čišćenja, cleansed or mopped up, in Glasenačko polje. And by 1995, Karadžić was a general, and during the course of the Srebrenica operation, was appointed commander of the Drina Corps by Karadžić. Here's an intercept between Karadžić and Zvornik Brigade Chief of Staff, Dragan Obrenović, on the 2nd of August, 1995, reflecting Karadžić's continuing efforts to cleanse eastern Bosnia, efforts that continued since 1992 and on into 1995. Karadžić, are you working down there? Obrenović, of course we are working. Karadžić, good. Obrenović, there are a few more got caught. Karadžić, Obrenović, either by the gun barrel or mines. Karadžić, kill them all, goddammit. Obrenović, everything is going according to plan. Karadžić, don't leave a single one alive. Obrenović, yes. Karadžić, don't leave a single one alive. Obrenović, everything is going according to plan. Everything. And Kusic? Well, Kusic was a major political and military figure from Rogatica. He was a member of the SDS main board, a man who led the cleansing of Rogatica in 1992. And in 1995, here's a report from Kusic reflecting how, just like Karadžić, he was finishing the job in Srebrenica. On the 7th of August, 1995, in the afternoon, in the canyon of the Pracha River, 5 remaining Balios, that's a derogatory term for Bosnian Muslims, who were after the fall of Žepa traveling along the following route, and he specifies that route in detail, went down to the railroad tracks at Dub and tried to reach Renovici walking on the railroad tracks. They were liquidated. The group was separate and had traveled for 10 days. The same day, in the vicinity of Lup, an unarmed Ustasha born in Srebrenica, 24 years old, was liquidated. Before he died, he said that he fell behind the others and he was looking for food. In short, Your Honors, Radovan Karadžić, the Supreme Commander, was directly responsible for Directives 4 and Directive 7, both of which were aimed at driving all Muslims from Srebrenica, was anxious to get it going. Karadžić pushed Krstić to move the plan along faster. Once his forces began the attack, he specifically approved a shift in the immediate operational plans and sent his forces into Srebrenica. As soon as his forces took Srebrenica, they immediately informed him. He was similarly informed that it was going according to plan and that Muslims were being removed in great numbers in an operation that required coordination with many municipalities, and informed that Muslims were being captured in great numbers. Mladic told him as soon as the civilians were bussed out of Srebrenica that Srebrenica is done. Karadžić delivered in code an order to take Muslim prisoners from Bratunac to warehouses elsewhere. His hand-selected civilian commissioner told him that Muslim prisoners were being murdered or had been murdered at Kravica warehouse. He called the main staff headquarters when he heard that Muslim men were escaping to Muslim-held territory, the one aspect of the operation he regretted, and he covered up with the press the fact that the VRS had prisoners and that they were killing them. And he continues to say it didn't happen. Your Honors, the crimes in Srebrenica, the mass expulsion of the women and children, the mass killings of the men, these terrible facts have been proven time and again in other trials before this tribunal. Now, we know there are some who, out of nationalist fervor, may stubbornly or naively claim that Srebrenica never happened. But when the man who was the supreme commander of the forces that committed the crimes, the man who acknowledged that he set those forces in motion, the man who was in contact with his forces throughout, when that man denies what happened, it is because he knows that the truth condemns him. But the living victims, the survivors, the women, elderly, those who were children in Potočari in July 1995, for them there is no question of what happened, only the lasting pain of loss. For those survivors, there's been no recovery, no restoration of lives that have not and cannot be restored as they were before their husbands, fathers, brothers were taken from them and murdered. Their ongoing tragedy, Your Honors, is part of the lasting legacy of the accused crime and part of the overwhelming evidence that belies his efforts at denial. Your Honors, I will conclude shortly, but before I do, I want to say a few more words about Karadžić's cover-up of crimes. For the cover-up of the organized killings and the wholesale expulsions in Srebrenica represent just another step in Karadžić's consistent pattern of hiding, deflecting, excusing, and denying. Denials to internationals and the media about cleansings, denials to the internationals and media about crimes in the face of allegations and information from international negotiators, from UNPROFOR, from ICRC, from UNHCR, from the Special Rapporteur, from Security Council resolutions, from the print media, from television. In the face of what was happening before the world, many of these allegations were explicit and anguished. Let me just show you one, the second report in October 1992 of the Special Rapporteur for the UN. That followed his most recent mission in Bosnia. In his October 27th report, he said, and I quote, "As indicated in the first report, the Muslim population are the principal victims and are virtually threatened with extermination," unquote. It's just a small snapshot of the repeated condemnations, the repeated confrontations, the repeated allegations that were made to Karadžić. But as Karadžić quoted one of his commissioners as saying, quote, "We are skinning the cat alive before the whole world," unquote. And as reflected in that quote, Karadžić didn't need the international community to tell him about the plight of the Bosnian Muslims and Bosnian Croats within those Serb-claimed territories. Because apart from the allegations he was receiving, apart from the reports from the army and from the police, apart from the admissions and acknowledgments from those within his circle that we've already heard, at least some of which we've already heard, even a cursory look at the documents, the meetings, for example, at the assembly sessions, reveal the awareness of the campaign against non-Serbs. Here, for example, is a session of the assembly at which an objection was posed to a proposed standard for citizenship in RS. That would be a standard based on birth. And that objection is revealing, albeit unintentionally. Quote, "Second, the citizenship of Republika Srpska shall be acquired, among other things, by birth in the territory of Republika Srpska. This refers to all the Muslims and Croats we expelled. In reality, they are also citizens of Republika Srpska," unquote. All the Muslims and Croats we expelled. And Accordingly, the bill was sent back to the ministry for review upon Krajišnik's initiative. Or look at this comment in 1995 from a deputy at the Assembly. Quote, "Sometimes, Mr. President, one should not listen to the patriarch either. He is a holy man, and we are practical men. Practical men who want to make a state. A state is made by killing, slaughtering, imprisoning, and arresting people. Every state in the world, including our own." Unquote. Or perhaps this quote, which puts it simply and perhaps wraps it up. This is from January 1993, again at the Assembly. Quote, "Believe me when I say that we cannot live together anymore. I don't know under what conditions we could live together now. I have to be honest and say that they cause so much evil to us," and that was a reference to World War II and the Ottoman occupation and the history. And continuing the quote, "And this time, we did not cause less evil for them either," unquote. And over again, Radovan Karadžić did his best to cover up this evil. Take the camps, for example. The court has already seen some of the evidence about civilians in camps, including the report by Karadžić's own Minister of the Interior in mid-July to him that, quote, "crisis staffs and war presidencies have requested that the army round up or capture as many Muslim civilians as possible," unquote. But he couldn't let the world know this. Here, for example, is a letter to The Guardian at the end of July 1992, 30 July. Quote, and this was sent by Karadžić to The Guardian. Quote, "Your article on the front page of today's newspaper is sensational. It is completely false to suggest that the Bosnian Serbs have organized concentration camps or that we hold civilian prisoners," unquote. The effort to mask the campaign against non-Serbs or to present it in some acceptable terms extended to the issuance of fig leaf orders to follow international law. I referred earlier to one of those orders issued at the commencement of the attack on Srebrenica. In some instances, as you'll see, Your Honors, their interest, that is the interest of these orders in international consumption, is rather clear on its face, as is the case of this signed order in August, addressed to the General Staff and to the police in English that, quote, "forced transfer of people and other illegal measures against civilian population must be prevented." Or to take another example, you'll see a July 1992 telegram to the presidents of municipalities in the Karadžić area. Telegram that those municipality presidents were responsible for ensuring the protection of villages in which Croat and Muslim inhabitants hand over weapons and do not intend to fight. This at a time when the army and the police were engaged in cleansing villages. And interestingly, one municipality president had the nerve to write back directly to Karadžić and note that he wasn't the one who controlled the army and the police. But even beyond their occasionally transparent nature, such orders clearly have no meaning in the abstract. And when placed in the context of widely known massive crimes fulfilling strategic objectives, crimes that were not punished, but as you'll hear, were rewarded with promotions, their pretextual nature is unmistakable. Officers and commanders were not disciplined for cleansing Muslim or Croat villages. On the contrary, the accused promoted and rewarded and encouraged those responsible for crimes. On January 9th, 1994, for example, Karadžić held a ceremony announcing that, quote, "Contrary to all the lies and slander of international propaganda mongers, the Serbian army maintained the knightly character and military honor worthy of it, and bestowed awards on his military and political leaders, including men like Radoslav Brežanin, Vojko Prešinin, Ratko Mladić, Dragomir Milosevic, Miroslav Doronic, Stanislav Galic, as well as notorious units like Mauser's Panther Brigade unit from Bijeljina. Karadžić's orders to investigate crimes were similarly cosmetic. It was not until ITN TV News broke the story of the horrors of the camps in early August, which set off days of intense and worldwide media coverage, that an investigation was ordered into this network of camps. You'll have a chance to see those investigations, but here, for example, is the investigation into the whole of the camps in SAO Krajina. A page and a half. The report on camps in the Ark was similarly feeble. Manjača camp, where 3,500 people were detained, warranted about or less than 300 words. Karaterm camp, which had 4,000 people go through it, warranted less than 60 words. Not a word about crimes committed, not a word about investigating those who committed the crimes. There was also a report by the Ministry of the Interior, a report which relied upon, for example, Simo Darliacha, the local police chief who ran the Omarska camp, a report that was sent to a commission that included one of the investigators at the camp. Again, not a word about crimes. And Darliacha, in conformity with the practice of rewarding and elevating ethnic cleansers, not only continued but was promoted and decorated. But the investigations, the denials, served only to bolster Karadžić's false claims to the international community that no cleansing was taking place. And all these denials were part of keeping everything hidden. For just as General Mladić had said back in May of 1992, quote, and he said this at the 16th Assembly session when he was selected as the main staff commander, and at which the strategic objectives were enunciated by Karadžić, quote, "The thing that we are doing needs to be guarded as our deepest secret. And what our representatives appearing in the media, at political talks and negotiations are going to say, and they need to present our goals in a way that will sound appealing to the ears of those we want to win over to our side, without being detrimental to our Serbian people. Our people must know how to read between the lines." Your Honors, in 1994, the accused said to his deputies at an assembly, quote, "Today we are standing in the same place where we stood at the time of the Lisbon Conference on the eve of the war. The only difference is the number of victims is huge on all three sides. We have ruined cities and somebody is responsible for it, but this is not a question of responsibility now." So who is responsible for the ruined cities? The destroyed mosques and churches, the lost lives, the shattered families, the traumatized survivors? Is it only the camp guards who beat prisoners or watched as others beat them? Is it only the camp commanders who oversaw the crimes being committed on a daily basis? Is it only the municipal leaders like Miroslav Doronic or Stakic who set up camps, coordinated and supported the military forces, and supervised the ethnic cleansing? Is it only regional leaders like Brjanin who exhorted Serbs that only a minimum number of non-Serbs could remain, and who oversaw the forcible ethnic separation? Is it only the military commanders like Galic and Dragomir Milosevic who conducted campaigns of terror against civilian populations, or who oversaw the capture and execution of thousands of Muslims? Is it only the VRS commander of the main staff who directed the Army's operations in ethnic cleansing, in terrorizing Sarajevo, in massacring the men and boys of Srebrenica? Or is it also their leader, the supreme commander of the VRS, the president of the SDS, the man who established the institutions, set and implemented the policies, directed his men, and defended their actions. Your Honors, the evidence from the victims and other witnesses, the evidence from internationals, the evidence from official Republika Srpska documents and reports, the evidence from the accused associates, the evidence from the mouth of the accused himself demonstrates that the answer, beyond a reasonable doubt, is a resounding yes. Your Honors, this concludes the prosecution's opening statement. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Tiga. The accused has absented himself from the trial for consecutive 3 days, despite having been given several warnings that such attempts to obstruct the proper conduct and progress of the trial would not be tolerated. As I announced last week, the Chamber must now determine the manner in which we will proceed after the prosecution's opening statement, and we'll hear from the parties on this matter tomorrow afternoon. There will be no evidence heard tomorrow. The purpose of tomorrow's hearing is to give both the accused and the prosecution the opportunity to make their submissions prior to the Chamber's decision. However, I would like to repeat once again to Mr. Karadžić our previous warnings and ask the registry to convey the transcript and the audio recordings of this hearing to him and his assigned legal advisors. Should he maintain his position that he will not attend the trial, we may proceed in his absence and assign counsel to represent him. We advise him to consider this carefully prior to making his oral submissions tomorrow. The hearing is now adjourned.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.